Hey guys, welcome to the channel, welcome to another video. It's that time of the week again, it's Premier League predictions time. Another round of Premier League fixtures is set to be upon us this weekend. Another round of intriguing and exciting Premier League encounters, and some huge ones at that, including of course a huge Manchester derby coming up this weekend. Cannot wait to sink our teeth and to feast our eyes upon the football that awaits us in this upcoming weekend. Big games affecting the entirety of the table, huge clashes that are going to be available to us, and this is obviously the video where we go through each and every single game, give my thoughts, my comments, my opinions, but most of all, of course, my predictions on how I think the games will pan out. Before we get into all of that though, I would like to remind you all to please like the video and also subscribe if you're new. Both things are always and probably greatly appreciated, and of course for you lot to get involved as well. I would love to hear your thoughts, your comments, opinions, but most of all, of course, I want to hear your predictions on each and every single game coming up this weekend. I'm sure along it for great and interesting reading. But without further ado, let's get on with the predictions. We're kicking things off with a London derby of sorts. It's Friday night's game. It is a match between Crystal Palace and Tottenham Hotspur. Big game this one. Of course, you've got Crystal Palace coming into this game on the back of a defeat after losing 4-0 to Newcastle last weekend, whilst Tottenham are still unbeaten this season, still top of the table, and come into this game off the back of a victory against Fulham on Monday night. Another London derby of sorts, in which Ange Postecoglou's side were 2-0 winners on that night. Are Tottenham heading towards a title challenge? I know we're only 9 games in, or 10 games in, coming up to the season, but title challenges are already being talked about for Postecoglou's side. Are we being a bit premature there, or is there something legitimate to hold to that? It's been a brilliant start by Spurs, and they'll fancy their chances here of getting something against the Crystal Palace side, who of course may be still hurting from that heavy defeat suffered at the hands of Newcastle. Slightly uncharacteristic 4-0 defeat by Palace in terms of obviously losing by that fine of a margin. But Selhurst Park obviously does represent a tough challenge for Spurs. It will be a tough opposition and a tough opponent, and also a hostile environment for Tottenham on a Friday night encounter. So this one could be very intriguing. As far as the result goes, look, Tottenham obviously come into this game off the back of good form. They come into this game with heavy momentum. They want to keep that going, of course they do. They also have the possibility of doing that in a more favourable encounter than maybe some others may have if obviously they were to be in this game. However, in saying that, Selhurst Park does represent a huge challenge, and I genuinely do think that Spurs have slightly been riding their luck in recent weeks in terms of obviously teams going against them, not finishing their chances, and Spurs have managed to capitalise on that. I'm not saying that's a bad thing against Spurs, I'm just saying that sooner or later that luck kind of wears out. And whilst Tottenham go into this game as the favourites and should be heavily considered so, and whilst it wouldn't be out of the realms of possibility for Spurs to get another 3 points in this game, I'm going to say that they've dropped points here. I'm going to say that Palace fight back from last week, get back to an unbeaten sort of way, and I'm going to say that they come out of this game with a point, which is why I want to call it down the middle. I'm going to say it's going to end in a draw, and I'm going to say that come the final whistle, this game will end 1-1. Next up, Saturday lunchtime's encounter, we'll see Chelsea take on Brentford at Stamford Bridge. Big game this one for both sides. You've got Chelsea coming into this game off the back of a 2-2 draw with Arsenal last week. It is another London derby of sorts for Chelsea in a way. And of course, Brentford coming into this game off the back of getting back to winning ways with a 3-0 victory over Burnley. Like I say, big game. Chelsea starting to find a bit of form of sorts. I know that they collapsed horribly in the final 15-20 minutes or so against Arsenal last weekend. But there was a lot of positives to take from Mauricio Pochettino's side on that day when they went toe-to-toe with Arsenal, and how they managed to thwart Arsenal and neutralise them for the best part of the game until, of course, a bit of a collapse at the end. As for Brentford, a win was very much needed last weekend. Like I say, for the most part this season, they play some good stuff at times. They just don't really have a clinical enough striker up front to put away the chances. Beating Burnley isn't quite the measuring stick that I thought it would have been at the beginning of the season, given how poor Burnley have been to start the season off. But at the same time, it was a win that was very much needed by Thomas Frank's side. And they'll go into this game, fancying their chances that they could, if they play their natural counter-attacking style, they will have a good chance of getting something from this game. However, with Chelsea picking up some momentum, with the likes of Mikel Mudryk picking up a good run of form especially, I think Chelsea will just have enough about them to get the job done here. And whilst Brentford always have the possibility of throwing up a surprise, particularly if their counter-attacking game is on point, I'm going to say that Chelsea come out of this with the 3 points. And that's why I'm going to give the slight edge to Chelsea and say that the Blues come out of this one as 2-1 winners. Next up, we're off to the Emirates Stadium. It is Arsenal taking on Sheffield United. Big game for Arsenal, obviously. Looking set to get back to winning ways after a 2-2 draw with Chelsea last weekend. Of course, Arsenal still come into this game unbeaten so far this season. Whilst, of course, Sheffield United are the opposite of that, in which they are yet to record a single victory during this campaign. You do wonder how patient Sheffield United are going to be with their current manager, with obviously the run that they're on right now, and of course their latest defeat coming against Manchester United, losing by 2-1. Big game for both sides. A relatively straightforward game to predict, you would imagine, although you would be hoping for some sort of upset and that Sheffield United may be able to get something over Arsenal, with Arsenal being at home. With Arsenal being unbeaten, with Sheffield United being in the extremely poor run of form that they're in right now, you can really only see one winner, unfortunately, for the Blades, and that is the Gunners. Which is why I'm going to have to say that this game will end in a victory for Arsenal, 3 points going Mikel Arteta's way, and the final scoreline, I predict, of 3-0 Arsenal. Next up, we're off to the Vitality Stadium for what could already be a massive relegation 6-pointer between Bournemouth and Burnley. Both of these sides come into this game off the back of defeats, of course, with Bournemouth losing 2-1 to Wolverhampton Wanderers last weekend, whilst Burnley, of course, lost 3-0 to Brentford. Huge game this one, a must-win game for both of these sides. Bournemouth, of course, winless so far this season, are without a win, and similarly to Sheffield United, you do wonder how patient the Bournemouth board are going to be with their new manager. Of course, they changed managers in the pre-season period, and it hasn't exactly gone to plan for Bournemouth, changing Gary O'Neill for this new manager coming in, and hasn't panned out the way that they were expecting. Similarly to Burnley, actually, who of course didn't really change managers, but of course arrived into the Premier League with so much hype and expectation that ultimately they haven't quite lived up to. Now, I know they've had a bit of a tough start to the season, but these next few games are quite favourable, or somewhat more favourable, to Burnley going forward, and it will be interesting to see how that does continue for them. Must-win game for both of these sides. Both of these sides do play some good football at times, but ultimately just do not have a consistent or prolific enough goal scorer up front to finish off these attacks, whilst remaining a bit leaky and weak defensively. This game genuinely could go any which way. It could be quite an intriguing game in that aspect. Bournemouth to pick up their first win of the season isn't out the realms of possibility. Neither is a draw, or neither is Burnley picking up only their second win of the campaign. In my prediction, I'm going to go with a Bournemouth win. I think Bournemouth can actually win this game, and I think they will actually pick up their first victory of the season, which is why I'm going to say that this game will end 2-1 in favour of the home side. Our Saturday night viewing comes from Molineux, and it will see Wolverhampton Wanderers take on Newcastle. Big game, this one, between a Wolves side who have picked up some fine form in recent games. You've got a Wolves side who are coming into this game off the back of 3 games unbeaten, with their latest result being, of course, a 2-1 victory over Bournemouth last weekend. You've also then got a Newcastle side who are coming into this game off the back of a 4-0 victory over Crystal Palace last weekend. Interesting clash lies ahead between the Wolves side who you would imagine will allow Newcastle to have the ball and try and hit them on the counter-attack. Gary O'Neill seems to be sort of getting his side together now and is sort of putting together a very tough Wolverhampton side to beat, and full credit to Gary O'Neill for that, and of course full credit to him as well for his appearance on Monday Night Football as well, in which he received rave reviews for the way that he broke down his tactical analysis. Interesting game. You do wonder whether or not the Champions League game that Newcastle will be involved in this week against Borussia Dortmund may play its part. Maybe the extra 90 minutes or so will play its part in the legs of their Newcastle players, and whether or not Wolves can take advantage of that will be interesting to see. I would imagine this Wolves side are going to be very difficult to break down. I would imagine it's going to be tough. But it is going to be a question of whether or not this Wolves side can take their chances, and I feel at times that is going to be not just in this game, but in terms of this season, is going to be a big question for Wolves that, of course, they haven't managed to answer for the past few years now. What we have known of Wolves is that taking their chances has been very difficult for them to do in the past. So whether or not that will continue or not remains to be seen. But they are starting to find their feet under Gary O'Neill somewhat. But this challenge against Newcastle is going to be very difficult between a Newcastle side who are scoring goals for fun in recent games and are doing so very, very prolifically. In terms of how I think this game will go, look, it isn't out the realms of possibility for Wolves to get something, but I've got to go with the favourites here, and I've got to say Newcastle will get the victory in this game, and that's why I'm going to go for a 2-0 victory in favour of the Magpies. Now moving on to Sunday's games, and first up, we're at the London Stadium. It is West Ham United hosting Aston Villa. Big game this one between two sides who come into this game with back of defeats, of course. Aston Villa beat West Ham United last weekend by 4-1 in what was a heavy defeat suffered there by David Moyes' side. Whilst Everton lost the Merseyside derby 2-0 to Liverpool, of course. Big game, interesting game between two sides who like to counter-attack. Two sides who, West Ham have had a very good start to the season and are looking to continue that and looking to bounce back obviously from last week's heavy beating by Aston Villa. And obviously an Everton side who are looking to put more points on the board to steer them clear of any sort of relegation battle. Intriguing game, interesting game. It's going to be difficult to pick a clear favourite in this one. You don't really know what Everton's side's going to turn up. Whilst West Ham may be the favourites and have proven so time and time again this season that they are very difficult to beat, you really don't know what Everton's side's going to turn up. Everton have picked up a couple of surprising results across this season. And, you know, they can be on their day a very difficult side to beat, a thorn in the side of the opposition. So it's going to be very interesting to see which Everton side turns up here. In terms of my prediction, look, it isn't out of the realms of possibility for Everton to get something, but I think with the home advantage, I'm going to give the slight edge to West Ham, and I'm going to say that the Hammers come out of this game with the 3 points and are going to be 2-1 winners come the end of the game. Next up, off to Villa Park for Aston Villa against Luton Town. Huge game, this one, for both of these sides. Aston Villa want to continue the momentum that they've built. They seem unstoppable right now and have really enjoyed a very good start to the season. One or two minor bumps in the road here and there, but they've certainly bounced back from those kind of things and, of course, enjoyed an absolute 4-1 thrashing of West Ham last weekend. They come up against a Luton Town side who picked up a point after a fight back against Nottingham Forest last week, in which the Hatters found themselves 2-0 down, but fought back to earn a point by ending the game drawing 2-2. Interesting game, intriguing game. Of course, you've got to go with the favourites here in Aston Villa, but don't rule out Luton Town entirely. Nothing in the Premier League is ever a foregone conclusion. If they can continue to show the kind of fight that they showed against Nottingham Forest last weekend, you wouldn't put it past Luton to maybe steal something from this game if they were to continue to frustrate Unai Emery's side. But in saying that, it does seem a little unlikely, and especially given the kind of form that Aston Villa are in right now, and the kind of goals that they're putting forward and everything, I think you've got to go with the favourites. I know Aston Villa are going to be in action in the Europa Conference League this week, and maybe the extra 90 minutes in the legs of those Aston Villa players may take its toll on them, but really they shouldn't have any issue in dispatching of Luton in this game, with all due respect to the Hatters, of course. Whilst it would be nice for the underdog to get something from this game, I can't look past Aston Villa getting a victory and the 3 points, which is why I'm going to say that this game will end 3-0 to the Villains. Next, we're covering Fulham's trip to the seaside as they take on Brighton at the Amex Stadium. Big game this one for Brighton because they are without a win in their last 4 games. Last weekend they lost 2-1 to Manchester City. They are without a win in their last 5 if you count all competitions. So it's been a bit of a bump in the road for De Zerbi's side. But this game represents a big opportunity to get back to winning ways against the Fulham side, who have been pretty inconsistent this season. They lost 2-0 to Tottenham on Monday night, so they are looking to get back to winning ways as well. Like I say, Brighton have hit a bump in the road. Fulham, inconsistent. They don't score enough goals, in my opinion. They found it much more difficult this season than they did last season, when they obviously arrived back in the Premier League. This one should represent a good opportunity for Brighton to get back to winning ways, and you wouldn't put it past Brighton to do so. They are going into this game as the favourites, in my opinion, so this game could be very interesting to say the least. But in saying that, Fulham will still be tough opposition. They'll be still tough to break down, you would imagine, but I am going to lean more towards Brighton. Home advantage, plus the way that they can play their football from time to time, I think would be enough, and they'll have enough firepower to overcome this potentially difficult Fulham obstacle. That's not to rule out Fulham entirely, but I just see the game going in Brighton's favour, which is why I'm going to say that this game will end 2-1 to the Seagulls. The penultimate game on this list sees us go to Anfield, where Liverpool will take on Nottingham Forest for your Sunday afternoon viewing. Liverpool, of course, coming to this game on the back of a victory, getting back to winning ways in the Premier League last weekend when they beat Everton in the Merseyside derby by 2-0. Mohamed Salah getting a brace on that day, whilst Nottingham Forest threw away a 2-goal lead to draw 2-2 with Luton Town. We know that last season Nottingham Forest caused Liverpool some food for thought. When Forest were at home, of course, we know that they picked up that infamous victory. But when they were away from home, although Liverpool did win that day, Forest were a very difficult side for Liverpool to contend with. And it was mainly down to the counter-attacking style of Nottingham Forest, and as well from set pieces, and particularly long throw-ins. You would imagine that this season Liverpool will be more prepared. You would hopefully imagine that Liverpool will be better this season than they were last season. Evidence suggests that that is obviously the case with how well they've started this season in comparison to last season so far. And with the way that Forest have been not as great this season, and they've also on a bit of a winless run right now, you probably would imagine that Liverpool should have no problem in not only arriving into this fixture as the favourites, but also seeing out that favourite sort of tagline and also going on to win the game. The form of Mohamed Salah in particular suggests that he is going to be dangerous in this game. He may not have had the best performances overall last weekend, but he still managed to end the game with 2 very fine and well taken goals. In terms of a prediction here, look, it isn't out of the realms of possibility for Forest to throw caution to the wind and get something from this game. Of course it's not. We've seen surprising results happen, not just this season, but in seasons gone by. It isn't out of the realms of possibility that maybe Forest could turn up away from home this season, but that is just the point. Forest away from home don't tend to turn up, and that's why Liverpool not only go into this as heavy favourites, but obviously being at Anfield anyway, but I think any team that were at home, you would suggest maybe the favourites going into a home game against the Nottingham Forest side. It isn't out of the realm of possibility, nothing's ever a foregone conclusion, but I've got to go with Liverpool on this one, and I'm going to say that this game will end 2-0 to the Reds, Mohamed Salah continuing his exceptional and phenomenal start to the season. And finally, in what I obviously see as the biggest game of this round of fixtures, the main event of this entire weekend, it is the Manchester Derby. It is at Old Trafford. It is the red half of Manchester, Manchester United, Eric Ten Hag, taking on the blue half of Manchester, Manchester City, and Pep Guardiola. Huge, huge game. You don't need me to tell you that that is a huge game. You just know it. It's a Manchester derby, of course. There are bragging rights as well as 3 points on the line. There is a lot at stake in this game, and of course you've got a lot at stake given the fact that obviously City only got back to winning ways last week with a 2-1 victory over Brighton. They've not been entirely convincing to start the season off, have Manchester City, but they are still obviously well within the title picture so far this campaign. And they come up against the Manchester United side, who have had a very inconsistent start to the season. They of course beat Sheffield United by 2-1 last week, but how much you can necessarily read into that, I'm not 100% sure. In saying that though, if United are to pick up a victory in this game, they'll only be 3 points behind Manchester City going forward, and obviously that says a lot more than it normally would, given obviously how everyone perceives United's start to the season being so poor. If they were to win this game and be 3 points behind City, well, maybe things may look a little differently going forward. Who's to really say? United, it's a tricky one, this one, because United may fancy their chances, and of course a derby day is always a good leveller, to use that old cliche. United may fancy their chances. They may take inspiration and belief and confidence from obviously beating Sheffield United last week, although it is albeit Sheffield United, all things considered, with all due respect. But maybe also that 1-0 win against Copenhagen midweek in the Champions League. They may also take something from that as well, and obviously prove to be a very big 3 points in terms of the Champions League campaign for Eric Ten Hag's side. A big goal, a match-winning goal for Harry Maguire, of course, and a huge penalty save in the dying embers of the game from Andre Onana. So maybe there is something to take away for, on the players' side from those two particular games. In saying that, City haven't been entirely convincing this season, but as we know, they don't normally tend to start the season off well. They always seem to get by hook or by crook, and then shift through the gears later on. What we do know is that this game will probably see City dominate possession. It will see City advance on Manchester United in pursuit of obviously the goals that they need, and United, you would imagine, will adopt a more counter-attacking style, probably use the likes of Marcus Rashford and Bruno Fernandes, their pace, creativity on the counter-attack to really help them out, and obviously try and penetrate the City back line, which they hope will commit many men forward for their own attacks. It could be a very intriguing counter-attacking game from United. It could be a very dominant performance from Manchester City. It could be very interesting either which way you look at it. But either way, I think we're in for a very big treat for our Sunday evening viewing, and for a Manchester derby that has got a lot more than just bragging rights riding on this. Massive game. Isn't out of the realms of possibility for United to get something, but I have to go with the favourites of Manchester City. I'm going to say that City come out of this game with the win, the 3 points, and I'm going to say that this game will end 3-1 to Pep Guardiola's side. And there you have it. Those are just the thoughts, comments, opinions, but most of all, of course, predictions of this guy. I want to know what you guys think. What do you make of this weekend's round of Premier League fixtures that are set to come up? What are your own thoughts, your comments, opinions, but most of all, of course, what are your predictions on each and every game coming up in this next round of Premier League action? I would love to hear them all and read them all down below in the comment section, because I'm sure it'll make a great and interesting reading. Otherwise, hit the like button on the way up if you enjoy the video, subscribe if you're new and want to see more content like this. Both things are always and forever greatly appreciated. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening. I've been Fletch. This has been another Premier League predictions video, and I will see you all again soon in another video or live stream or whatever it may be. Cheers, guys. Have a good one. Take care. See you and talk to you all soon.